Hello again, and here it is, Arizona Springtime Memoir of a Journey. This will be chapter 13 of 17, Springtime Wildflowers, Cactus, and Shrubs of the Desert Scrub. The local flora of the high desert is the heartbeat of the ecosystem. They pump the lifeblood of food and nutrients that the rest of the body, all other creatures, need for life. Blooming flowers during the early part of spring are as synonymous in the desert as they are anywhere in the United States, except drought years. In 1935, Mina Edison, wife of Thomas Edison, was president of the Bird and Tree Club, a group of amateur enthusiasts based in the eastern states. She wrote a brief foreword to the wonderful little book Wildflowers at a Glance by Julius King. The wee tome contains drawings of wildflowers by Kevin Thurber. For the most part, all of the flowers included are well known in the northeastern United States. Many of the flowers have delightful common names: wake robin, blue flag, spring beauty, marsh buttercup, mayapple, old maid bonnets, Queen Anne's lace. Another book, later on, Appalachian Wilderness, offered large full-color photographs by famed art photographer Elliott Porter. He recorded photographs of the wildflowers, most of which grow in the Great Smoky Mountains: yellow violet, Mayflower, bird's foot violet, wake robin, also in the northeast, fire pink, shepherd's cress, mayapple, also in the northeast, showy orchis, pineland daisy, and sweet shrub. These common names for flowering plants show an appreciation for the variety of spring blooming wildflowers. Some of those names may have originated from nurseries catering to the interested amateurs, or from the historical record of other early enthusiasts. The thoughtful, pleasant names show an earnest attempt was made by enthusiasts to encourage others to appreciate the simple pleasures of wildflowers. By the time people moved to the desert Southwest, members of the eastern states flower clubs, or those enthusiasts and horticulturists that name flowers, did not join the migration to the western states. Instead, the naming of flowers appears to have been left to farmers and ranchers. Either that or the science of botany appeared to have run out of complementary names for the wildflowers. Many wildflower names for high desert varieties are not complementary. We desert dwellers are subjected to goathead, dogbane, horseweed, velvetweed, peppergrass, sandwort, winterfat, milkvetch, buckthorn, toadflax, skunkbush, bladderpod, and loco weed. Such spurious names do not do justice to many of the plants. Maybe goathead fits, since that plant has a mean seed pod with a 3-speared caltrops able to pierce all soft-soled footwear. During one season, I scraped off and picked off the goathead seeds and left them on the tiles lining the porch to the barn. I thought maybe ants would haul away these pesky seeds. The next day, all of them were gone. On subsequent days, the goatheads continued to disappear. The ants had done their job. But one day I went to the barn, and all the goathead seeds were back on the tiles. Yes, even the ants had rejected the goathead. Yet another wildflower with the disjointed name of velvetweed has no obnoxious attributes. The flowers of the plant are tiny, and to see them, I must bend over to study the blossoms. Without a close-up view, I could never know how wonderful the flowers are. My local variety of velvetweed should be renamed pink lavender sparkler. Small insects know how to appreciate the wildflower, but the plant may be overlooked by desert enthusiasts because its flowers are so minuscule. The point is, many of the desert wildflowers have beautiful flowers, and their names do not reflect appreciation for the desert country adapted flowering plants. Not all have disreputable names: claret cup, annual paintbrush, longflower snowberry, golden currant, prairie sunflower, patchy plume, old man sage are thoughtful but few in number. Instead, we have names no one else would want to admit was on their property: curly cup gumweed, stemless woolly base, cocklebur, and broom snakeweed. Many names end with weed. I'm not quite being fair, though. Many wildflower common names in the East have also questionable names. None other than Henry David Thoreau, the great 19th century philosopher, essayist, and naturalist, had issue with the names of some plants. His diary entry of May 26, 1852 reflected lousewort, very badly named. What is the definition of a weed? A plant that is not useful in agriculture or as forage for domesticated animals. This definition explained a lot for me. The flower club people did not move west, and the farmers or ranchers did, and we ended up with the aforementioned names. I think there should be a new club of desert plant enthusiasts that will rename some of the desert plants with a respectful, descriptive name. It worked in the eastern states. Now, we here in the West could use a good renaming project. During my formative years in the Midwest, every spring meant a profusion of wildflowers. Such is not always the case in the desert Southwest. Sometimes after a dry winter spring, there is a show of very few wildflowers. If the rains in winter are plentiful, once every 8 years or so, the result is known as a super bloom. The most prolific of wildflowers in those years is the golden poppy, or California poppy. The low-growing flower can cover entire fields, hillsides, and mountainsides. Ray Manley, one of the premier early photographers for the magazine Arizona Highways, was one of the inventors of the modern desert landscape style of photography. He used a 4x5 view camera to record color photographs of scenic wonders of nature. His travels throughout the state were extensive, and he became a popular scenic landscape photographer. It was through photographers like him that we see the first landscapes printed in color. Spectacular vistas containing acres of blooming poppies common today were first recorded by him and others of that school of photography. In spring 2001, it was the poppy that super bloomed throughout southern Arizona. On our way home from Tucson, late one morning, we saw 10 cars pulled over at the margins of the interstate. As we drove by, people were so enamored of the super bloom, they left their cars, took out their film cameras and early digital cameras to photograph large fields of poppies seen directly off the highway. At our house, we could see entire hillsides in yellow gold displays. The color resonated over the Steel Hills, Winchesters, and Galeras. In 1998, we were driving home from a trip to the old mining town of Globe, and while we crossed the San Carlos Apache Reservation, we saw a once-in-50-year display of entire mountainsides blanketed in yellow and orange. Lining the margins of the roadway for miles were solid lines of purple lupines. Writer of many color photo guides for desert country flowers, George Olin described an Arizona super bloom during the 1970s. He likened the rare but spectacular event to winning a jackpot on a slot machine after 3 bars lined up. He went further in his analogy. He explained that the first bar represented the rain that had fallen either in early winter or late in the fall. Further, the amount of rain must not be too little, or the protective layer covering the seeds would not wash away. The second bar is the necessary mild weather throughout the winter. The third bar is for the big payoff. It is a result of a nice solid rainfall sometime in February or March. Then the desert explodes in, quote, unforgettable splendor, end quote. Near Picacho Peak, along Interstate 10 between Tucson and Phoenix, the Mexican poppy can erupt in spectacular displays of color. These fortunate years, the hillside becomes a deep orange shade of yellow. Only near the steep apex of the sheer cliffs are the wild flowers kept at bay, and the stark barren rock remains. There are other wildflowers that can become prodigious spectacles. Brittlebush is a short shrub with greenish-gray leaves and perky bright yellow flowers. In the middle of Texas Canyon, along the high-speed interstate, bright red penstemon add a dramatic contrast to the pale pink rocks. Elsewhere in the desert, the particular palette of wildflowers is highly localized. Edward Abbey, in Arches National Monument, gave an inventory of wildflowers during his reminiscence. He mentioned mule-ear sunflowers hugging the side of a road, and then listed the other wildflowers from his vantage point: yellow borage, Indian paintbrush, scarlet penstemon, skyrocket gilia, prickly pear, hedgehog cactus, purple loca weed, the coral red globe-mallow, dockweed, sand verbena, and cliff rose. But it was obvious Abbey recognized that some of the names did not do justice to the plants. For the desert country, super blooms get all the attention. Other wildflower blooms under their own conditions. One member of the verbena family is growing well here in our area due to air conditioner condensation that falls from the slanted metal roof. The mock verain is the most widely adapted species in Arizona. The plant blooms with a display of clumped flowers ranging in color from white with a breath of violet to a light purple pastel. They can grow year-round and are among some 19 species of verbena in Arizona. While growing naturally, it was one of the more successful of the several plants along the drip line. The family of verain also includes lantana. Lantana is an ornamental plant popular in urban and suburban gardens, patios, walkways, and around pool areas. Globe-mallows can turn an undistinguished wildflower year and make it salvageable. I can always count on seeing globe-mallow in spring. The blooms are a reddish-orange with oak-like leaves hugging the ground. The plant is widespread along the margins of roads. On our property, we can count on the plant outside the front gate on ground that runoff from heavy downpours will flow. In Mexico, the globe-mallow is known as the mal de hoyos. The plant is used in folk medicine as a cure for sore eyes. The Hopi use the term copona for globe-mallow chewing gum. The local variety, S. fendleri, populates pine forests in areas with oaks in lower elevations. The low-growing plant attracts many insects. The Albison's checkered skipper, with its large, dark, fly-like eyes and its dark gray-brown to black wings, are checkered with extensive, abstract, white, translucent spots. The skipper will lay eggs on the plant so the larva can feed. Gaillardia puchella, or the pleasantly named Indian blanket, as in Pendleton, not Navajo, is also a common and underappreciated wildflower. It stands above the low growers, but well under the height of the brittle bush. The Indian blanket has ribbed petals that radiate out. Gaillardia flowers are colored a sunny yellow, changing to pink-orange on the interior of the flower, then a light brick red bullseye. It can often be seen throughout much of the flowering season, from spring into summer and even into autumn. It is among the last of the flowering plants for lingering butterflies to gather nectar from late into the year. The chocolate daisy has flowers that smell like chocolate. It grows in mounds about a foot high. It is distributed along elevations of 4 to 5,000 feet. It grows well in alkali from a limestone-laced soil. The daisy-like flowers are a perky yellow, geometrically rayed to a maroon eye-ring with a strange pale green maze-like structure at the center. Outside the maze are the sex organs lined up around the maroon ring. It is also called lyre leaf green eyes, named for that inner green maze that remains after the petals fall. Slender goldenweed is found throughout the southwestern United States and is also a native of New York State and Maine. It is a member of the sunflower family and has a perky look of a sunflower. There is a showy bloom with bright yellow petals and a golden center. A large number of flowers will bloom on a plant that will grow as high as 1.5 feet. While the plant will attract insects, for human observers, the yellow blooms are the most common color of desert wildflowers. To the casual observer, it is easily overlooked. Velvetweed is a member of the evening primrose family. This particular species is considered an invasive weed. It is found throughout most of the entire lower 48 states. It has a long, slender stalk that grows far above the low-lying leaves, relatively speaking. The flowers project around the entire stalk. The flowers are pale pink with many blooms opening at the same time. Closer up to the top of the stalk, the flowers are intensely concentrated. The pistils and stamen shoot out like small starbursts of exploding pink fireworks. I like pink lavender sparkler as a descriptive name instead of velvetweed, but I'm alone in that regard. I have and will always be mesmerized by cactus flowers. I can never get enough of the subtlety of color displayed on the waxy stained glass petals. One of the most common and considered as a pest in cattle ranges is the Engleman prickly pear. This year, the flower colors on a single Engleman included a palette of light pink, onion yellow, and sunset orange. This widespread cactus does not have a stalk, but instead pads grow upon pads. The sturdy pads can pile as high as 5 feet and spread 5 to 15 feet wide. They grow throughout the property, and most of them are growing under a nurse tree, shrub, or fence. They use the nurse for the rain concentrate that falls from the nurse onto and around the cactus. It is interesting to watch the cactus throughout the year. In springtime, after a decent winter rain, the pads have no wrinkles and look healthy. During the late spring drought, plants will exhibit stress by wrinkling. Fungus is the main culprit for a sick prickly pear cactus. Rarer in our arid environment are bacteria that can also affect a prickly pear. If infected, the cactus will die down to nothing, but dried out skeletonized former pads become collapsed hulks. Yet one pad always survives, collapsed onto the ground, and will later root itself. 1 year later, that single surviving pad will grow to fill the entire plant's former space and look as healthy as if nothing had ever happened. Like all cactus, the defensive spines will keep all but small animals from eating it. Even small animals will encounter the numerous spines that radiate up and out. The javelina may be the only large desert animal that will take a bite from a prickly pear. The animals are desert tough, just like other plants and animals. Prickly pear fruit may ripen many months after the blooms drop. The green fruits will grow, then remain that way until the monsoon rains of summer. Then the fruits ripen and turn a dull red. The thrashers and woodpeckers with long beaks will arrive to feast. The mission prickly pear will grow from a central stalk, and if enough of the cacti are planted in a row, the wall of cacti can serve as a fence, given enough time. The main trunk and side branches can reach heights of 10 feet, but only if the plant is supported. When the mission prickly pear is small or just a few loose pads, the plant needs a nurse plant or a surrogate. Either an old weathered church mission wall or a mesquite would serve. We have seen both strategies to great effect in our travels to borderland Mexico. After the rains of winter this past year, the mission prickly pear on our property became plump with water. Large pads and sections began to break off at the thin connectors between the main stalk and pads. The pads are shaped like upside-down pears. The ungainly, top-heavy plant may break, and a pad or pads will fall to the ground. I planted 15 fallen pads under the north or shady side of small and medium-sized mesquites. I hoped the mesquites would act as nurse plants. All have survived. During my transplanting the plants, I discovered that the mission has fewer spines than other prickly pears, but the few spines are a nuisance and will irritate fingers with tiny hair-like spines. It may take a day or two to fish them out with tweezers. Mexicans name the cactus nopales, for the pads are used as a natural food of the desert. Another species of opitia includes the common cholla cactus. These cacti grow upright with numerous spiny joints and come in a wide variety of styles. One is the familiar thick and profusely segmented teddy bear cholla. Forests of the prolific cactus are impenetrable, except from wholesale destruction from developers. One of the more pleasant scenes within the city limits of Tucson was the teddy bear cholla forest, just north of the profusion of Union Pacific Railroad tracks on the far southeast side of the city along a major north-south road. It was recently raised so that Amazon could build a distribution center. I have chosen to no longer drive along the road. There is no longer anything interesting to see. We have two types of cholla that grow on our property. One is the walkingstick cholla. Our most impressive specimen had a single stalk that grew 12 feet high. It would sway during the high winds of mid to late spring. Then one day it collapsed. All of the joints that had held up the plant, like a house of cards, were strewn over the ground. Then all those took root and became new plants. Where we once had a single plant that covered a couple of square feet, we have many plants that cover about 30 square feet. Then new plants continue to grow and have reached heights from 2 feet to 8 feet. All the new plants participated this spring with a profusion of deep, bright red flowers. Another of the cholla family, the Christmas cholla, is one I had not discovered until recently. It It was hiding in plain sight under a large grizzled mesquite. It has very thin segmented sections that reach 6 feet high. The fruit of the cholla is a petite red spiny bulb that remains attached until late fall. The cholla grew up naturally under the north side of the nurse mesquite. Among the shrubs and trees that are common in the local desert scrub is soaptree yucca. They are an indicator species of the Chihuahuan Desert. The yucca grow from a single stalk that can ultimately climb to a height of 30 feet. These plants are members of the lily family and are among the showiest during the spring bloom. In spring, as the flower stems begin to rise up from the main vertical stalk or smaller side stalks, the growth is so prodigious that a daily record could be kept. As it reaches its final height, the stem will form a bouquet of blossoms of small, perfect white bells. The blossoms may crowd the terminal end of the stem to become top-heavy, causing the stem to bend over. Some dip halfway to the ground, while others have enough stem strength to remain upright, even during the fierce springtime winds. We see many types of birds and insects, including ants, go straight up the stalk. There are also birds such as the house finch, who feed upon the flowers. A small white moth is vital to the pollination of this species of yucca. After the moth leaves its underground cocoon, the males and females meet at the newly opened yucca flowers to mate. The female, when she is ready to lay eggs, will gather pollen from one flower, fly to another yucca, and after she lays eggs inside a small opening at the flower's ovary, she will use her collected pollen to fertilize the yucca. Most of the yuccas in our area have stems that reach a height of 12 feet. The fronds and main stalk grow on average to around 6 feet. The main and small side stalks are protected by layers of dried fronds that remain as sharp daggers. Historically, this species of yucca was used by the native populations. Fibers were stripped from the leaves to use in basket making and are still used by Tohono O'odham craftspeople. Fibers from inside the trunk can be used as a natural scrub brush, and the roots produce soap, from which their common name originated. Besides people, other organisms use the yucca stalks. Large, female carpenter bees will make a hole in fresh, erect flower stems. Do not go near a yucca if the bee is buzzing around. She packs a powerful sting. Wright's wolfberry is popular among the local songbirds. The plant is a dense tangle of gray, spiny branches that also grows under a nurse mesquite. The wolfberry will grow deep roots early in their development, like the yucca and mesquite. Those roots serve as an anchor. If the bush in its immaturity is mistaken as a weed and it is pulled, it does not yield. The flowers are only 6 to 7 millimeters long and form a white-pink tube. The Cyneus checkerspot is a small 40 millimeter butterfly with black and orange wings, and it pollinates the delicate flowers. The wolfberry will later produce a profusion of 3 millimeter bright red berries. The tiny flowers are not visible unless I stand next to the bush and use my reading glasses to spot the minuscule display. This particular wolfberry is known to sparrows that congregate in entire flocks within the branches as protection against predators. If any hawk, kestrel, or roadrunner is seen, the birds will immediately fly to the wolfberry. When they leave the wolfberry, they hop up into the adjacent mesquite, where they are also well protected. Scaled quail will also take advantage of the berries by hopping up to low-hanging branches where the tiny berries haven't been taken by other birds. This year, a curve-billed thrasher began to build a nest within the shrub, but they were unceremoniously evicted by a pair of roadrunners that began to build a nest directly next to the curve-billed thrasher nest and then abandoned it. The songbirds have had to revise their place of retreat for now because the roadrunner discovered how to enter a wolfberry. The yellowbird of paradise escaped northward from South America and is now naturalized in parts of Arizona. Plants do not have the typical thorns and needles that other desert plants use for protection. It is notably spectacular because of the contrast between the crayon red filaments shooting out from vibrant yellow flowers. The bird of paradise will bloom in spring and continue blooming throughout summer and early fall. It disperses seeds using ballistochory. The large brown and green tinged seed pods will explode when ripe. They dispel a sharp, audible snap that can surprise anyone, as I can attest. Some mornings in spring, the black-chinned hummingbird will drink nectar first from those flowers before going to the sugar water feeder. The bird of paradise grows wild and showy on the property, even as a deep, dusty, and hard pan soil forms during the annual late spring drought. Even though they are newcomers to the desert, they have adapted and are now an important plant for birds and butterflies. Thank you, and see you soon for the next chapter.